For as long as I can remember, something in my relationship with my mother was never entirely clear. It wasn't cruel, not in the way one recognizes as violence, but it wasn't warm either. There was a distance that couldn't be explained with words, a subtle but constant coldness, as if her love were measured, as if I had to earn it. As a child, I tried my best for everything, for her hugs, for one of her smiles, for hearing her say, "I'm proud of you." I became the girl who didn't bother anyone, who got good grades, who didn't ask too many questions. I just wanted to see her happy with me. And when I succeeded, when he laughed at something I said, or stroked my hair without noticing, I felt that it was all worth it. But those moments were rare, always brief, always followed by silence, criticism, a correction. I grew up believing that something was wrong with me. She had been born with an invisible defect that only she could see. During my teenage years, our arguments became more and more frequent. And when I finally left home, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness, as if escaping was an act of betrayal, but also of survival. Years passed. We tried to stay in touch. Sporadic messages, tense birthdays, meetings that lasted less than they should have. And yet, she was still my mother, the only one I had. And when my life collapsed, when everything fell apart after an unexpected breakup, I thought of her house, of mine. I thought that, perhaps this time, I could return and find some comfort. If this story is resonating with you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. But what I found was the complete opposite. I remember it was raining, not a dramatic movie-like rain, but a constant gray one that seemed to perfectly match how I felt inside. I had gone through a devastating breakup. After years of building a life with someone I thought was the one, it had all crumbled in a matter of days. I was left without a partner, without a home, without direction. And that's when I did something I never imagined. I called my mother. I didn't know what to expect. We'd had a strained, fractured relationship for years, but she was my last resort. And somewhere deep in my heart, I still clung to that childlike hope that she would welcome me with open arms. When she answered, her voice was neutral. "Hello. Hi, Mom. I need a favor. I'm going through a tough time. Can I stay with you for a few days?" There was silence. Long. Uncomfortable. "I suppose so," she finally said, "but only for a few days. I'm in a different stage of my life." I felt a lump in my throat, not because of the answer itself, but because of the tone. There was no concern, no tenderness, just boundaries, from the very first second. Even so, I went. With my few belongings, a broken heart, and the need to feel I had a safe place. When I arrived, there was no hug, no questions, just one sentence. "The room is still yours, but please respect my schedule." And that's when I knew I wasn't going back home, only to a house with familiar walls. I settled in quietly, trying not to disturb her, cooking for both of us, cleaning, looking for ways to please her. Just like when I was a child, I thought time would give us another chance. I thought maybe we could start over, but what he didn't know was that she had already made her decision, and I was just an awkward visitor. For the first few days, I behaved like a guest. I would get up early so as not to interfere with her routine. I cleaned more than necessary. I cooked, but only for myself. I tried not to leave any traces, as if that could prevent her from seeing me as a burden, but every gesture she made it clear that my presence made her uncomfortable. He asked me not to use the bathroom in the morning because it interrupted his energy for the day. She told me that I couldn't leave clothes drying in the yard because it didn't match the aesthetics of the place. Once, without warning, she came into the room where I was sleeping and started rearranging my things, without asking permission, without asking. "I'm just tidying up. This room can't get out of control," as if I were the chaos that needed to be contained. I began to feel tiny, outsider, an intruder in the house where I grew up. But the most painful thing was a casual conversation. One ordinary afternoon. "When do you think you'll be able to leave?" she asked me while watering the plants. There was no anger in his voice, only a surgical coldness. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't offer any help. She just made it clear that my stay had an expiration date. I told him I was trying, that I was looking for a job, that I needed a few more days. He nodded, without looking at me, and at that moment I understood something. I was not welcome, not because I had done anything wrong, but simply because My presence was unbearable to him, and although I tried to justify it, I thought maybe I was stressed, that I didn't know how to handle my emotions. Deep down, I was already beginning to suspect that there was something more, something she wasn't telling me, and that it had much more to do with me than I could have imagined. Everything exploded one night. There was no warning. There was no obvious provocation. It was just as if something she had been suppressing for years finally needed to come out. I was in the kitchen, making tea. I'd left a cup crooked, and when I picked it up, a little water spilled on the counter. A minor thing, an everyday occurrence. She came in at that moment. He looked at me. His eyes were different. "Are you leaving everything dirty again?" he said. I turned around, surprised. "It was an accident. I'll clean it up." "It's not about that," she continued. "It's about you invading my space. This is my house. You're not a child anymore." His voice was firm, harsh, like a final judgment. "I'm just trying to recover. I'm not here for fun," I replied calmly, though I was trembling inside. "Well, it doesn't seem that way," he said. "You settle in as if everything belongs to you, as if I have an obligation to support you. And then, the phrase I will never forget, 'I need you to leave. Tomorrow.'" I remained silent. I felt like the ground was giving way beneath me. "What? Are you kicking me out?" "It's not personal," she said, as if that could soften the blow. "I just can't go on like this. This house belongs to me, and you. You're old enough to manage on your own." I didn't answer. I didn't cry. I went to my room. I closed the door. And that night, I didn't sleep. I was just packing, silently, automatically, without fully understanding how I had gotten to that point. My mother, the same woman who brought me into the world, the one that should be my refuge, he kicked me out of the house where I grew up, as if I were an unwanted tenant. At dawn, I gathered my things, went downstairs, and left. She didn't say goodbye. He just closed the door, as if I were closing a chapter, as if it had never been my home, and I, for the first time in my life, had nowhere to go. That night I slept in my car, or I tried to sleep. I had 2 suitcases, a couple of blankets, and a bag with books and papers I couldn't leave behind. The car was parked in front of a closed supermarket. It was the only light that made me feel a little less alone. Outside, the city went on. Inside, I was falling apart into 1,000 pieces. I didn't cry at first. I was in shock. I kept hearing his voice in my head. "This house belongs to me. You're old enough to manage on your own." As if my breaking down were reason enough to be discarded. I remembered so many things that night. My childhood, the times I hid under the table when she yelled at Dad, the time she refused me a hug, saying, "Don't be so dramatic," the time she seemed to look at me as if she didn't recognize me. And yet, I always came back to her, because she was my mother, because I believed that beneath that shell there was love, perhaps cold, clumsy, silent, but love nonetheless. But that night, in the back seat of my car, I understood something much crueler, that maybe there was never any love. Perhaps I was just an extension of his mistakes, a constant reminder of something he couldn't control, a mirror reflecting an image he didn't want to see, and that hurt him more than anything. He didn't kick me out because of the toilet, or the bathroom, or the mess. He fired me because my existence was unbearable to him. And that truth, though it still had no clear form, began to burn deep within my soul. That night I slept hugging my backpack, not because of the cold, but because I needed to feel that something still belonged to me. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of a shopping cart hitting a nearby car. I sat up with a sore neck, puffy eyes, and the feeling of having aged 10 years overnight. I turned on my cell phone. I had several missed calls from a familiar number. My aunt, my mother's younger sister. She had always been different, sweeter, more human, but also quieter. Someone who knew too much and spoke too little. I called her back. He answered the first ring. "Where are you?" he asked without saying hello. There was urgency in her voice and fear. "In my car," I replied, trying not to show my embarrassment. "Mom kicked me out." A heavy silence fell, the kind that only happens when someone already knows the story, but doesn't know how to tell it. "Are you alone?" he finally asked. "Yeah, I'm coming to pick you up." "No, Aunt, I'm fine. I just need to think." "No, I'm coming to pick you up." He hung up. When he arrived, he sat next to me in the car and looked at me as if I were a 5-year-old girl. He took my hand. I couldn't meet his gaze. If anyone showed me compassion, it broke me. "You deserve to know the truth," he said. And then he said it, the phrase that changed my life. "The reason your mother kicked you out has nothing to do with you. It has to do with your birth." I felt a chill. "I don't understand." "Your mother never wanted to be a mother," she said, her voice breaking. "But not out of selfishness, but because you came into her life because of something terrible, something she could never overcome." I looked at her confused. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it wanted to escape from me. "What are you saying?" Auntie swallowed hard. She closed her eyes for a moment, and she finally told me, "Your mother didn't conceive you out of love. She conceived you after an episode of violence, something she never reported, something that destroyed her. And when you were born, every time she looked at you, she remembered what they did to her. Everything inside me stopped. The air, thoughts, time. So, I couldn't finish the sentence. "No, you weren't the pain," she said firmly. "But for your mother, you were the reminder. And she spent your entire childhood trying to love what life had thrown at her. But she could never heal." The words pierced me like shards of glass. I wasn't rejected for what I did. I was rejected because of what I represented. And that hurt in a way I couldn't describe. "She should have asked for help," my aunt continued. "But instead, she burdened you with a weight that was never yours to bear." And I stood there, silent, feeling a part of me crumble forever. She was no longer the daughter seeking approval, not even the adult who wanted refuge. She was a woman who had just discovered that her own existence had been a wound to the person who should have loved her first. I didn't cry. Not yet. The shock enveloped me like an icy coat, because the truth didn't just hurt me redefined. And from that moment I knew that nothing would ever be the same. That night, I didn't sleep in the car anymore. I stayed at my aunt's house. She made me some hot soup, gave me a blanket, and said nothing more. She just kept me company in silence. Sometimes, that's what you need most. Someone who doesn't try to explain the inexplicable. I sat on the sofa and let the ceiling speak to me. And there, in the midst of that silence, I understood something devastating. All my life, I had felt that something wasn't right. That my mother's love came with conditions, with guilt, with hurt. But I never imagined that her rejection stemmed from so far back, from before my first breath. I was the result of an act she could never heal. A scar with eyes, a memory that breathed, that spoke, that followed her everywhere, and that broke me. For years, I believed that if I was better, more obedient, more perfect, she would love me. I killed myself trying to fill a void that wasn't even there. I blamed myself for every silence, for every distance, for every look I didn't understand. But now, I understood everything, and I didn't know what to do about it. I wanted to hate her, for treating me like an intruder, for not asking for help, for having kicked me out. But I couldn't, because I also understood that she had lived with a pain that devoured her from within, that she brought me into the world without knowing how to look at me, that she raised me with fear, with anger, with guilt, and that no one saved her. Perhaps he was also a victim. And although that didn't justify what he did to me, it did allow me to see the whole picture. I had inherited a pain that was not mine to bear. I had been shaped by a history I did not choose. And that night, for the first time, I didn't feel defective. I felt human. Broken, yes, but not guilty. And in that crack, a little light began to enter. A few months have passed since that day. I moved to a small town, far from everything I knew. It wasn't an escape, although at times it seemed like it. It was an act of rebirth, of starting over without the shadows that always followed me. Sometimes I still wake up with that feeling of being out of place, of not having a home in the deepest sense of the word. But there are also days when I wake up and breathe differently, as if my body is beginning to understand that now. It truly belongs to me. I never spoke to my mother again, not because I hate her, but because I understood that some relationships only heal with distance, and that sometimes loving in silence is the most mature way to let go. I am grateful to my aunt, not only for her house, her soup, her blanket, but for her truth, the one that hurt so much, but set me free. Now I build my life without asking for permission, without waiting for approval, without seeking glances that never knew how to see me. I've started writing. Words I didn't know I had inside me. Fragments of my story that I now want to share, not for revenge, but for healing. Because I know there are many people out there who, like me, carry inherited pain. Silences that were never their own. Rejections that didn't stem from their actions, but from invisible scars on others. And if you are reading this, and you have ever felt unloved, unseen, unchosen, you are not alone. You weren't born to carry anyone's pain. You belong to yourself. And your story begins when you give yourself permission to rewrite it. Not all betrayals are shouted out. Some are felt in the silence, in the words that never arrive, in the doors that close without explanation. And sometimes, those betrayals come from where it would hurt the most, from the person who brought you into the world. My mother didn't reject me because of who I am. He rejected me because of what I reminded him of, because of a buried history that could never heal. And although that devastated me, it also explained the inexplicable. Today I understand that there are pains so deep that they transform love into rejection, that they make impossible what should be instinctive. But I also understood that my worth does not depend on his wound, that my existence is not a mistake. Even though I was part of a broken story, I have the right to write my own from a place of self-love. If you've ever felt like you weren't enough for those you needed most, if you ever thought your pain was invisible, or that your presence was bothering people, I'm telling you now, it wasn't you. They were her wounds, her story, her fears, and you don't have to carry that burden. Let go, breathe, and it starts again. Because you deserve a place where your existence doesn't hurt, where you are not a memory, but a beloved presence.